Are you worrying about anything right now? Or have you worried about anything in the last couple of weeks? Or do you think it's even likely you might worry about something in the next couple of weeks? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then there's something in my talk for you. Since COVID began, I've spent my entire life working with the employees of my clients to help them deal with the significant stress and pressure that everybody is feeling as a result of the changes of the pandemic. I've put more than 2,000 people through programs in the last 6 months. After a recent program, a young lady stayed behind to ask my advice. Let's call her Anna. Anna told me that she was blessed to be married to a man who loved her every bit as much as she loved him, had beautiful 2.5-year-old twins, had a job she loves in a company where she's considered to be a top performer. So life in general was pretty good. Or at least it was until COVID. Now Anna finds herself working from home. So is her husband. So herself, her husband, and the 2.5-year-old twins are spending most of their waking hours in the confines of their one-bedroom apartment, which Anna told me is starting to feel really, really small. Anna confided that this has put a pressure on the relationship that was never there before, and they find themselves falling into rows on a more frequent basis, so much so that she finds herself with a pattern of thought that sometimes wakes her up in the middle of the night, thinking, what if we break up? And what if I raise the twins alone? And what if I lose my job and I can't pay the mortgage? And what if, and what if, and what if? The purpose of my talk today is to share with you just one small part of the advice that I give people like Anna to help them overcome the tyranny of the what if question that's driving an invisible epidemic of worry that's doing almost as much damage as the pandemic. To understand the way worry affects us mentally and physically, it's important to understand the way the brain processes fear and threats. If you were to take a pen and stick it in your eye, and take another one and stick it in your ear, and please don't do this at home, well then where it crosses would be in the middle of the so-called emotional brain, specifically on a small almond-shaped object called the amygdala. And your brain has 2 of these amygdalae on either side of the brain. And you can think of them as being, for all the world, like the smoke alarm of the brain, continually sniffing out through your eyes and your ears for anything that constitutes a threat. Now, for the emotional brain, a threat has a very broad definition. It's anything it hasn't seen before, anything it doesn't understand, anything it doesn't have control over, anything that brings any uncertainty, or anything which is a genuine, clear, and present threat, like going outside in a group and contracting COVID. And if it detects one of these threats, it starts an amazing and extraordinary survival sequence that runs completely on autopilot, without involving your thinking brain, completely under control of the emotional brain. It gets your heart beating faster, your lungs breathing more deeply and more quickly to get oxygen-rich blood around your body to your arms and legs, which are now like charged springs ready to fight that threat or run away from it. Now, when that response evolved a couple of 100 million years ago, it was really apt for the threats we faced. Think saber-toothed tigers. But today, the threats we face tend to be more subtle. Think of a letter from the tax authorities, or an angry email from the boss, or the threat of going outside and contracting COVID. The response is a little less appropriate, but brains evolve really, really slowly, and we're stuck with this response. We have to work with it. Additionally, this response switches off your digestive system, switches off your immune system, and kills your sex drive. It also jams you full of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that get you hyped up so that you're faster, stronger, smarter, more focused, more awake, more alert, and more twitchy than you've ever been in your life. That's why when you're under stress, when you're feeling threatened, you'll often find that you've got pains in muscles you didn't exercise. You've got more stomach aches than you ever did before. You catch flus and minor infections more easily. Sex is just not interesting. That collection of symptoms and sensations that we experience when we're under threat is something called anxiety. And it all begins with that amygdala. The amygdala, again, it could also be thought of as a fortune teller trying to foretell the future. Because after all, If we can predict the future and there's a threat there, well, then we can plan to avoid it. But the reality is, we've never been very good at predicting the future. But sometimes when we're under the pressure and the stress that we have in times like this, the brain gets tricked into thinking that it can. And when it does, it responds with the brain's equivalent of hyperventilating, producing an endless cascade of thoughts, none of which contribute anything useful or positive, and all of which seem to be focused upon the worst-case possibilities. What might happen if everything went really, really badly wrong? And sometimes, when that happens, we begin to believe that these are real, and the brain responds to them as if they are genuine threats, with the anxiety and the stress that you would experience if your life was in danger. When that happens, that can suck the life from your life, suck the color out of your life, and your entire life becomes focused around worry. When that happens, it's time to interrupt that pattern of thoughts and to stop the tyranny of that what-if question that is draining so much from so many of us during this difficult period. A couple of years ago, you may recall a US Airways jet crash-landed on the Hudson River in New York. And a couple of minutes after it took off, geese flew into the engines, and the captain of that jet, Sully, was hailed as a hero for this so-called miracle on the Hudson because he saved his 150 passengers. The real hero in that situation was the checklist that Sully went through with his co-pilot when they discovered that they were under difficulty. All over the world, pilots rehearse with checklists for emergencies so that they know exactly what they're going to be doing when they find themselves under the pressure of an emergency, because they know that when that happens, their thinking brain is not going to be switched on, they're going to be operating from the emotional brain, and they're going to be under anxiety. And if they don't rehearse, they don't know what they're going to be doing. When you find yourself under intense worry, you don't know what you're going to be doing when you're experiencing that anxiety unless you have rehearsed beforehand. Over the last several months, I've synthesized a checklist that you can use to prepare so that when you find yourself under the pressure of worry, you know exactly what you're going to be doing. And it comes with the very handy mnemonic of NAIL. And the first step of NAIL is notice. Now, the first time you notice that what-if question, you need to say to yourself, I'm beginning to worry. That may seem counterintuitive, because none of us want to acknowledge that. But the moment that you notice, the moment you say, I'm beginning to worry, you trigger the thinking brain into action, and it starts immediately to down-regulate the response of the emotional brain, turning off that cascade of thoughts and starting to help you get things into perspective. The second step is allow. Brains worry. It's one of those things they do. You can't stop it, you can't push it back, you can't resist it, you can't suppress it. So the best thing you can do is allow it to be. You may not like it, so say to yourself, I don't care for this much, but it's a normal reaction. I'm going to let it be, and then move on to the I step. The I step is investigate. When you hear the first what-if question, ask yourself, what is actually going on here? Is there anything I can do about it? If the answer is yes, then just do it. If the answer is no, you're probably worrying about something that hasn't yet happened. And like 85% of the things that we worry about will probably never happen. So you can move straight on to last step, L, which is leave it until later. Set a worry appointment in your diary. Put it in a specific time, specific date, for a specific period of time, and when it comes, keep that appointment. Sit down with a pen and paper and work through all of the possible solutions to what's bothering you. And when the appointment is over, do exactly what you do with every other appointment. Let it go and move on with your life. And if you feel you haven't gotten to the back of it, well then set another appointment for the following day, another one for the following day, until you're feeling happy with it. Now, this is not a silver bullet. you're always going to worry. And a certain amount of worry actually keeps you focused on getting done those things that are important to you. But when worry starts to take over your life, why not have it that you've rehearsed with a checklist that allows you to nail worry before it nails you? Now that's an idea worth spreading.